Okay, sorry folks, that isn't good, right? Okay, let's have a look at this question. Explain how is our command. Explain how. So again, we already know with explain how questions, we're going to be using terms like through. Well, so-and-so happens through the following. We're going to be using terms like by, this happens by the following. That's how we explain how things. We may also use therefore, comma, this means. This kind of language is going to be very common in this type of answer. Explain how Tom's coach could use a knowledge of operant conditioning to improve his volleying technique. So we want to apply it to volleying in this case, so we want to give some examples of that, but how could operant conditioning actually be done in that way? And I've prepared the answer in advance for you, so if you're actually, even if you're watching this live, you can actually pause on the DVR. When I put this answer in here, you might just want to pause and have a read of it, especially if you're on demand. If you're on the live stream, of course, you may want to keep up with me talking about it and doing it that way. But as I put it in, I'll just take a couple of moments of silence just for you to have the opportunity to pause that. Okay, so let me have a little look. I mean, if you're on the live stream, just hang on and we'll go over it together, all right? So I'm assuming you've had to read of that, or if you're on the live stream, you haven't, and you just wait for me. But let's go through, explain how Tom's could use a knowledge of operant condition to improve his volleying technique. So the coach could do this by, and okay, I'm in explain how mode, manipulating the environment. There's one of our key pieces of language from operant condition. We're looking for 4, by the way. So that Tom's volleying technique is shaped, behavior shaping, to being correct through trial and error learning. So I'm getting all of my key language into my explanation of how this will be done within this environment. Okay, an example, and we want to relate it to Tom's volleying, of course, could be placing a marked area on the court, which is where Tom should volley from. Now, I might get a mark for that. I'm shaping the environment so we've got Tom's kind of volleying position correct. Or placing targets on the court where Tom should be aiming. I'm shaping his behavior. I may well be getting my mark for that. This means he strengthens the correct SR bond. Okay, and let me give it for that one and I'll get my max. So what have I done there? I've used my key language to explain how Tom's coach could do this, and I've given examples from the specific area that I've been asked to talk about. So again, I think that answer would actually be worth, if there was 6 available, I'd probably get 6. But in this case, I'm looking to pick up 4. I've got at least 4 key terms which are related to the content, and I've related those in a practical example which is relevant. Okay, justify. Justify is a really interesting command word, okay? With justify, we're tending to say things like the reason for this, the reason for this. We can say things like I believe. You can say things like, it's one of the only commands that allows you to do this actually, I think, another reason, and so on. Okay, so this is the kind of language we're using in a justify question. Justify the use of operant conditioning in the coaching of tennis to beginners. So we're specifically looking to justify with operant conditioning for beginners. So we have to almost find criticisms in other theories which operant conditioning kind of fixes for us. Let's see what we've got. Let's see what we've got here. So let's see. Let's uncover the same here. I'll just pause for a second as I put the answer in. So, I'm assuming you've read that if you're not just following on live. So the reason for this, so I'm in my justify model, the reason for this, just the orange doesn't have significance other than it's kind of like it's language of the key skill. The reason for this is to create and strengthen the correct SR bond. So create and strengthen the correct SR bond. Okay, let's just link those two things up. Another reason is the operant condition does not require intrinsic feedback. So we do not need the performer requiring the intrinsic feedback, which of course beginners don't yet have. They don't yet have the intrinsic feeling of the correct skill, nor an understanding of the skill. So they don't need an understanding of the skill, which of course cognitive stage learners often don't have. And novices have not developed this yet, as I just said. Because of this, the coach can manipulate the environment to shape the behaviors of the novice learner. Okay, and there's our max. I'd probably get a mark there if I needed it, but I've got my 4. So I'm clearly justifying the use of operant conditioning, clearly for beginners. I'm using my key language within the answer. So it's actually a nice summary at this point, right? Can you use your key topic language to get to the answer within the skill that's been requested of you within the question. You might notice when I do these things, I'm really specific. If I'm asked to explain how, let me tell you, I'm explaining how. If I'm asked to justify, I am justifying. If I'm asked to describe, which I think we might have one in a minute, I am going to describe, okay? I am going to perform that skill. And hopefully that is exactly what your exam board is expecting. Because of course, if they've put it in the question, one would like to think that that is the skill that you're going to be honoured for. Now, you might say to me, well, James, it doesn't matter. I don't get any marks by saying by or through or this means. That's true. But the way it works for me is the answer in this case is that I'm thinking through a paradigm, like a modality, a mode. I'm explaining how, and it draws out of me the key knowledge which is relevant to that question. So you might want to think about, even when you learn something new, you study university or do something next year or whatever, or you're preparing for one of your other exams, you might want to think, right, here's the key content relating to a particular topic area, right? How does that work? Or how does that influence? Or how can that be applied? When you're thinking about something like evaluation, say, like you might ask your teacher, Miss, Sir, whatever you call them, what are the disadvantages of this? Are there any weaknesses to this theory? If you're not asking those questions, you're not preparing to, for in this case, in this example, evaluate. For teachers out there, if we're not building in the skills of asking questions like how, why, are there any weaknesses, what's the disadvantages, what's the advantages, if we're not building those into our classroom experiences, we're not preparing our students to perform these particular skills. So that's something we all need, I think, to reflect on and focus on. Something that I've been doing a lot better in my own teaching in recent years. Anyway, I'm banging on. I'll stop there.